Hey guys, and welcome back. So for today's video I'm going to be going over color channels, shadows, and highlights. I got quite a few responses sent to me about how I do my lighting and how I fix my shadows and my highlights and all those things. So I figured for this video I was going to do an outside photo and an indoor photo. I was sent two images from Lisa Foy Photography. Of course, this image is the outside image, and I will jump into an indoor image in a couple of minutes when I go over the beginning steps on how to fix your lighting. So there are a couple ways to do this, and for the colors and the highlighting and all that kind of stuff, they are pretty much the same for every type of Photoshop that you have. So the things that I will show you in this video using Adobe Photoshop Elements is pretty much the same as any other program like Photoshop or anything like that. What I like to do is I like to look over my image and basically find out the things that I want to change. So for this image, you can see that there is a lot of shadow, and if you zoom in just a tad bit, you can see that she has a lot of shadows on her face, a lot of shadows in the background, and of course you can see this big shadow right here. So I'm going to show you how to fix that. First way that you can do this, and just staying on your background image, you can go up to Enhance and go to Adjust Lighting and go down to Shadows and Highlights. Now it's going to bring up this little tab right here, and when it does that, it usually already fixes your image for you, but sometimes it can look a little funky, so I just like to put everything back at 0 as my original image. So this is where you want to lighten your shadows. You can darken your highlights and your midtone contrast. So what this is going to do, let me just zoom in a little bit. This is basically going to lighten your shadows. So if you bump this up, you can see all the shadows pretty much disappeared. Now, if you want to darken your highlights, you can play around with this a little bit, and it kind of changes the image quite a bit. And I usually don't mess with this one too much when I'm just lightening my shadows. And then you can also go back in and play around with your contrast. I just like to bump this up just a tad bit to give the subject more contrast. And you don't have to, you can leave it the way it is, and we can go ahead and touch on the contrast topic a little bit later on. So you can go ahead and hit OK. You can see now the image is pretty well lit. Okay, so another way that you can do it, just staying on your background layer, you can go up to Enhance and Adjust Color, and you can go down to Adjust Color Curves. And you're going to get this bar, and again I like to stay on default. You can switch through these options, and you can, if you wanted to, you can pick which one you would like. But I kind of I stay on default because I like to play with it myself. So what you can do is you can increase your highlights, and what that does is it increases all of the highlights in the image. So like her face, the house, her scarf, anything that is pretty much already well exposed. Now for the midtone brightness, you can bump that up too, and it kind of lightens the background a little bit. And then the midtone contrast, again, you can, turn it down, you can turn it up, whichever one you want to play with. And then for the Adjust Shadows, you can lighten your shadows, and you can darken your shadows. So we'll just put these all back around 0. The reset button, and I'm going to play with the highlights and the brightness and the contrast and the shadows to where I think this photo should be at. So yeah, I'm just going to adjust my highlights a little bit just to brighten up the background, and I'm going to increase my brightness, a little bit more contrast. I'm going to bring down my contrast just a little bit, and then I'm going to increase the shadows, basically taking them away. So as you can see now, it's pretty well lit. You still have some problem areas down here and over here and along this tree and things like that. Typically only use this method if the photo is okay. If it's not like too exposed or too underexposed, I will use this method. Now, the third way that I'm going to show you how to do this is I'm going to go ahead and play with the color curves. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create an adjustment layer. And what this is going to do is when you create another adjustment layer, it'll give you a layer that is basically everything underneath the background image. If you use just the background image, everything's being set on top of that image. Now, if you use an adjustment layer, it is a lot more lenient with whatever you're doing. You can turn it off and on, and you can change it a lot. It's not going to be stuck on that one background image. So what you're going to do is you're going to come up here to the adjustment layer panel, and you're going to go down to levels. Now, it brings up your levels for your image. So now if you go up here to the channel, you have your different colors. You have your RGB, which is pretty much the entire image, and then you have your red, green, and blue. Now, if you guys don't know like the opposites of the colors, just go over that with you quick. Red is pretty much, you bring it up, there's red, you bring it down, there's cyan. So the opposite of red is cyan, and then the opposite of green is magenta. So if you drop those levels, it's going to turn magenta, and if you increase it, it's going to turn green. Now the blue, if you drop your levels, it's going to bring some more yellow, and then of course if you up it, it's going to be blue. Now, one of the biggest things you want to do when playing with color is to figure out where your different color channels are and their opposites. I do a lot with his channel because you can adjust a lot of the image, whether it has too much color or too less color. So that's why I like to use this method. Now, I'm just going to stick on the RGB level, and that basically is just your red, green, and blue. So if you play with these, it's going to change the entire image. What I like to do when I do the RGB is I will just bring up the colors a little bit, and it'll change the entire image. It won't just play with one specific color. And what you can do is you can bring these up, and of course it's going to lighten it. You bring it back down, it's going to darken it. Now what you can do is you can take your little droppers right here, and like if you click on this one, this is going to be the darkest, and then your grays, and then your whites. You can take this little dropper and you can click on somewhere that's dark, and automatically it changes the image to dark. But you can go ahead and play with the levels, and it will change basically the color that you clicked on or the shade that you clicked on. Now if we go back, I'm just going to reset this quick. If you go to your grays, you can click on, like her dress is gray. Click on her dress, and you can either darken it or you can lighten it to that specific color. And again, your whites, we can click on white. We can make them darker or brighter. Look at this image. Since it is outside, we get a lot of natural light, and it really doesn't look like there's too much red or green. Skin looks pretty natural. I mean, there is a little bit of red, but that's typical. And so now what I'm just going to do is I'm not going to play with any of these. I'm just going to stick to the RGB. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lighten it up a little bit. And then I'm going to create another adjustment level. And then now I can play with the rest of the image. So now that I already brightened it to where I would like it, I'm going to bring a little bit of that color back down so it's not too bright, because when I had it the way that it was, you can see that her face is a little bit overexposed. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop those levels just a tad bit to get it so it doesn't look like it's too underexposed. So that is pretty much everything for the outdoor image. The other thing that I like about with the adjustment layers, instead of just working off the background image, is you can turn these layers off and you can see your original image, and then you can turn them back on to see the image that you created and how different it is. So this is the regular image, and this is after we played with the lighting. So now her face is very well lit, and a lot of the shadows are gone. First, like I said before, I always like to find where my shadows are at and where my highlights are at. So as you can see, there is quite a bit of highlight right here, and there's quite a bit of highlight right here, and then the baby is pretty much all shadow, and then you have some highlights over here. So you can use whichever method works best for you. I pretty much have it down packed as to how I do my lighting and my shadows and things like that. I've had a lot of people ask me how I do it so quickly, and simply it's just because I do shoot with all natural light. I just recently bought a lighting, so shooting with natural light, typically I get a lot of shadows, and sometimes they're overexposed, sometimes they're underexposed, and that's just how I like to shoot. So I kind of played around with all the options of changing the lighting and things like that, like I showed you before, and I kind of just made my own way of doing it. And once you do it so many times, you can do it really quickly. I did already show you all the steps and things that you can do with the color curves and the lighting and stuff like that. I'm just going to do the typical way that I change my shadows and my highlights. So I'm not going to be doing any cropping or any full editing on this image because I am making a step-to-step tutorial after this video. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to be focusing on the baby and the lighting and the shadow and the highlights. So of course what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to my adjustment layer, and I'm going to go to levels. Get into my adjustment level, I can see that this baby's skin has a little bit of a red cast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to red, and I'm just going to take away some of that red. And as you can see, this was the original image, and I'm just going to bump that down a tad bit. I'm going to jump back to my RGB, and I'm just going to play with the highlighting. So I'm going to bring it up quite a bit because I want the baby to be well lit. I don't want there to be any shadows or things like that. So now that that is done, you can kind of see the difference. It pretty much lit the entire picture and kind of evened it out. But if you want to highlight a little bit more, what you can do is I'm just going to crop this image quickly. Just so I have just the baby. Okay. So now, now what you can do is you can go back in and you can create another adjustment level, and you can move these around a little bit more. You can leave your image like this, or you can change it up a little bit more. Now what I'm going to do, because the arms and the body is still a little bit dark, I'm going to take my quick selection tool and I'm just going to grab the baby. I've got the entire baby selected. I'm going to go over to my adjustment level, and I'm going to hit the levels button again. And as you can see over here, it just has the baby selected. So I'm going, and now you can see that you can play with the color of the baby. So this is at 1, and I'm just going to lighten it up a little bit more. And as you can see, it's not much at all. Now that that is done, that is pretty much how I fix lighting in an indoor image. Now, of course, you can still see a little bit of red in the palms and the arms and stuff like that, but I will show you guys how to even out the baby skin tone in the next tutorial that I will be doing. But, so yeah, that is pretty much it. That is how I do my lighting in every single one of my images. Sorry that it was a little bit of a lengthy video. I just wanted to make sure that I covered everything that had to do with lighting and the shadows. There were a lot of comments about how to set up your lighting to kind of get the shadows taken away, but usually I have noticed when I have used lighting, I still have shadows no matter where I place my umbrella lights. Yeah, so if you guys liked this tutorial and you thought it was helpful, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. I will be doing a lot more tutorials like this. I will be creating a playlist for all these videos so you guys can find them easier instead of scrolling through all my videos on my channel. If you guys have not subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe for more tutorials and learning techniques with photography. And again, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I hope it was useful and helpful. So with that being said, I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.